Okay guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode I take a look at the X-Men's Origin Wolverine movie from 2009. It has a 37% on the tomato meter and a 58% on the audience score. So very close to not being rotten, and yet it is rotten, and I've heard it argued all over the world online. It is rotten. I'm not going to say that it's not rotten. In fact, I think it pretty much deserves to be at about 58%, perhaps even 50% on the audience score. To me, the best part of this movie was the opening montage. The opening montage showed the Wolverine and his brother Sabretooth battling across different wars of the U.S., of the United States, everything from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, into the present day. And of course, that was not only the best part of the movie, but that's where the movie started to go downhill after that montage. This is, yes, an Origins movie, meaning that this was an attempt, I guess, by Marvel or somebody to start a new X-Men franchise. We would have had other X-Men Origins movies. Maybe we would have had X-Men Origins Magneto, for example, but that never happened because this movie didn't do so hot at the box office. Now, the interesting part of this movie right off the bat is that there was a kind of a pirated or bootlegged version of this that was released before it came out in the movie theater, and it featured most notably special effects sequences that weren't finished. Otherwise, it was the actual complete movie. It was fully edited. It was the finished product essentially, except for the CGI, just had placeholder CGI. Some of it was finished, but a lot of it wasn't. And I recall seeing this back in the day in 2009, and there was quite a little, dust up in the press where Hugh Jackman and others, they stated to the media that they were very disappointed that pirates had gotten this and spread it all over online. But, the only thing that was wrong with that pirated version was, in fact, the CGI wasn't finished. Now, the funny thing, the ironic part of this, is that when I saw the actual finished product of Wolverine, well, I didn't see it at the theater. I saw it on DVD release. I believe I actually got this from a Redbox back in the day. Yeah, you know what? Some of the CGI that had been finished or had been claimed to have been unfinished in the pirate cut, yeah, it was the same in the released version. Most notably, X-Men Wolverine's metal claws, his adamantine claws. There's a scene in the movie in which he displays them quite prominently in front of a mirror, and you get a good look at this CGI'd claw that he has, and it looks just as bad as it did in the pirate version, meaning that the CGI had been finished. In a lot of cases, it was just not very good. Now, there's a conspiracy theory out there that the reason that, unfinished CGI pirate edition came out all over online, maybe somebody at the studio did that deliberately, kind of to head off the bad critique that would come out with the CGI. A little bit conspiratorial, but I can see, especially with all the water that's gone under the bridge in 2018, 2019, with some of these movies, the shenanigans that the studios play. Yeah, I can see that maybe the studio did that deliberately to say, well, hey, the CGI was bad on this. No, you must have seen the pirated version, the pirate version that was stolen by somebody and leaked ahead of time, and we're so outraged by this. That's just a little conspiracy theory that's out there. But anyway, let's move on into the actual audience reviews, and I'm going to first start by saying that this is a little bit of a divisive movie. In other words, out of 4 or 5 people that might have gone to see this film, like let's say 4 young men went to see this film, and when they walked out of the movie theater, 2 or 3 of them would actually be arguing with each other over whether this movie was good or not. Some people said, hey, this movie was great, I had a good time. And then other people said, no, this movie was crap and it offended me. How dare they release this Wolverine movie? What were they thinking? And these were people that would largely agree on other films, on other comic book films, and yet they don't agree on this one. So in the reviews, we're going to see a lot of people saying, hey, I don't know why this gets the hate. This is just like any other comic book movie. And then we're going to see other people that give this half a star, or they would say they would give it 0 and claim to be completely offended that it exists. And, we'll get into the reasons for that, but this is actually very divisive. And if I had to pick a movie from back in the day before politics was, the big thing in the movies, I would say that this movie was very divisive to the fans of the X-Men franchise. So let's start with a November 15th of 2019 5-star review. Only a true comic book nerd can appreciate this X-Men film. That's a 5-star review. Somebody that really thinks this is fantastic, and I kind of believe them because I've heard a lot of people not only bagging on this movie online, but singing its praises too on the same websites, on the same forums, right beside each other. So I'll pretty much say that, yeah, a lot of these 5-star reviews, they're authentic. Remember, this is 2009. This is long before, we had the shenanigans that are going on now with Rotten Tomatoes and with big, gigantic studios trying to boost their numbers and use parts of their marketing budget to falsify things that might lend more credence to, the quality of the film. Anyway, I'm going to give my, star review, and I would say that this is deserving of a solid 2 stars, maybe even 2.5 stars. I wouldn't quite go to 3 stars because, some of the CGI, it looks really bad and cheap the way it was done. But hey, 2.5 stars because the first time I saw this on DVD release, I hadn't heard anything about it. There was no controversy at the time. I wasn't reading these reviews online and keeping up with that. And so I actually enjoyed it, believe it or not. I didn't think it was the best movie of all time. I didn't think it was the best X-Men movie. I, at the time, considered X-Men The Last Stand to be the worst of the X-Men movies when this came out, and I thought this was better than X-Men The Last Stand. I still think it is in a lot of ways, but on second or third viewing, yeah, this really falls apart, and you can see how cheap it is. So I give it 2.5 stars. Although back in 2009, I would have given this 3 stars because I didn't have anything to compare it to. So let's move on down. We have half a star, November 2019. I saw this with my best friend Joshua. When there was a fight scene, Josh would take out his foam swords and start hitting people. He then went to the front of the theater and started dancing and fighting with nobody in front of him. He then started to scream how much he loves this movie, even though it sucked ass. He got kicked out of the theater, and I didn't speak to him for a full year. That's a crazy story, and I completely believe it. I didn't have that experience. Well, I didn't see it in the theater, but I believe what that reviewer's saying. Again, his friend thought it was so awesome, and maybe his friend had been drinking too, maybe, but he obviously thought it was crap. So again, it's a little bit divisive there. Half a star. Saw this, okay, same thing. 2 stars, terrible CGI, boring. Logan and the Wolverine are much better. Yeah, I'll say that Logan is considered the pinnacle of the X-Men franchise, even though it's not technically an X-Men film. It's more of a Wolverine film, and certainly Wolverine's endgame story. Yes, it is considered a 9 out of 10, even by people that aren't into the X-Men comic films. Just on the, actual film story, the story of it itself, without it necessarily being a comic book story. Now, as far as the Wolverine, I saw that in the theater at the time. I was expecting a lot. I was kind of confused why they were calling one movie The Wolverine when this movie had already been out. I enjoyed The Wolverine, but again, I thought it had weak parts like the actual end. The sort of boss battle at the end I thought was weak, and it didn't hold my interest that well. But up until then, I really enjoyed the Wolverine. Now, terrible CGI, I covered that. There are a lot of parts where the CGI is not only not real looking, but it looks cartoony, and it actually, for example, there's a scene in which logs fall off a logging truck, and the logs are CGI, of course, and they kind of fall off this logging truck and crash to the ground, and the way they crash to the ground and just stop, and the look of that, and with physics and what we know of real world physics, it doesn't match up and it doesn't look believable. The logs, for example, come to a dead stop on the ground and don't shift or move it in any way. And you can tell that, they had the technology to do the CGI, but they did it cheaply. They didn't have enough time to make it look really good. They didn't have enough time to put a realistic polish to it. So oftentimes it would look like you could see the flaws in it and it just didn't look quite real. It stuck out a little too much. So I'll agree with that. And the 2 stars, I'll agree with that. We have another one here, 3.5 stars. Everybody scolds this movie, but not me. Again, it's a little bit divisive. People see how much people rag and bag on this movie online, and they don't get it because they enjoyed this. And I was kind of one of those people at first, but then when I go back and look, on repeated viewings, when I caught this again, I see what people are saying. It's very unpolished, unfinished, and there are other problems with it too. 2 stars. Brought to you by the makers of Game of Thrones. You can tell once they ran out of source material, but I can't see how that happened with this movie. Yeah, the story, it's like somebody had a good idea and a good script, and then it suddenly got chopped down. Maybe the budget got cut. I don't know what the story was, but it's like they knew where they wanted to go, but then they cut out a lot of the stuff that would have made it feel better. And we got stuff that seems kind of incongruent in tone. On one hand, this movie starts out as like a thoughtful, deep and dark romance of some kind, and then that goes into straight up goofy comedy, and then in another part it goes into like comic book unrealistic action, and then at the end it still wants us to take it all seriously and get some kind of dark meaning out of it. But it has a lot of different things in it that don't seem to go together: comedy along with seriousness along with goofy stuff. And they deliberately took liberties with X-Men characters from the comics in seemingly a deliberate way to just insult those characters, or to like rub the fans the wrong way. I don't know who is responsible for this, but you'll most likely hear of this spoken in regards to the Deadpool character played by Ryan Reynolds. Not only Ryan Reynolds' performance of Deadpool, but what they showed Deadpool as being at the end with kind of Superman, laser eyes, and the way in which he fought Wolverine at the end was very cartoonish and stupid and contrived, and it didn't look very good either. And it seemed like they were trying to make a statement by sewing Deadpool's mouth shut, because Deadpool, to comic book fans, even before the movie came out, he was known for being, the superhero with a big mouth that nobody could shut up. And they sewed his mouth shut in this movie to make sure he couldn't say anything. So that's definitely not an accident. They were trying to send a message, and definitely the comic book fans picked up the message, and oh, they were very mad about that. And for years I heard about how angry they were at the way Deadpool was shat upon in this movie. And this is long before the Deadpool came out with Ryan Reynolds that we know today, that everybody loves. 3.5 stars. Everybody scolds this movie, but not me. 2 stars. Brought to you. Okay. Repeating myself. 3 stars. I thought it was okay, but the Wolverine and Logan were great improvements to the Wolverine trilogy. 2 stars. This movie has a major problem, and that is trying to fit a lot of content in so little time. Nevertheless, Hugh Jackman playing Wolverine is always a win. I'll agree with the 2 stars, and I agree this is, Wolverine and Hugh Jackman go together like peanut butter and jelly for most everybody out there. So I don't even think we can do Wolverine with anybody else at this point. It's going to take, a good resting period of a decade before comic book fans are going to accept anybody else as Wolverine, that's for sure. 2.5 stars. The worst of them all, but don't worry, it's just a strike one. The Wolverine is the one you want. Well, don't get too excited. The Wolverine kind of falls apart at the end. Yeah, it's interesting. It has kind of a message, or at least it seems to. But then it kind of doesn't take itself seriously at the very end. It just turns into a video game boss battle that's not very realistic. But other than that, it's great. 3.5 stars. The movie in itself would not be good if we just see the plot, but Hugh Jackman and Liev Schreiber are perfect actors and make the movie very good and enjoyable. Well, yeah, Liev Schreiber and Hugh Jackman both do passable jobs. They don't do anything in their acting that's bad, but the script has them kind of nonsensically going through the plot points. And it's like portrayed in this movie that they're brothers. They grew up together in the wilderness of Canada. And it kind of just slaps a plot together to have them meet up again as, antagonists to each other. And in the end, of course, Sabretooth, played by Liev Schreiber, he's Wolverine's brother. He ends up actually on his side at the very end in a very cliched way. So let's not get too excited about them, their performances. They didn't do anything wrong, but the script did a whole lot of wrong with them. In particular, I can talk about the wire fu mechanics in this movie. Liev Schreiber, running or leaping around like Sabretooth and, climbing walls and etc. You can see where the wires are attached and it looks very bad. Some of the shots look literally like they weren't even trying and they just pulled him up by wires and he flailed his arms and legs around to go through the motions and not even in a half-assed good way. And it's very off-putting, how cheaply they did some of this stuff. 2.5 stars. Introduced new characters. Good intro for Deadpool, even though his character arc got worse at the end. Thankful they weren't many more sequels or spin-offs for more potential storylines for what Fox had previously planned. To think Fox was going to make more of these Origins movies if this was successful with critics and audiences. Good action set pieces, and that's all. Yeah, this was supposed to be the one of many of these so-called X-Men Origins movies, and that didn't happen because this pretty much like blew that possibility away. Nobody wanted to invest in more of these. That's too bad because maybe they could have pulled this off with, other directors and with other characters. But this one just soured too many producers, I guess. They're the ones that control the purse strings. And, there are other things wrong with this plot-wise, really stupid things. For example, Colonel Stryker, he's got a whole bunch of mutants caged up in his base, and he's using their powers to steal their powers and add them to Deadpool to make this Weapon X character. The only problem is he's got characters like, for example, the Scott character, the one with the eyes, the what do you call them? I don't remember what his character is called. He's got the the mask or the covering over his eyes that when you take it off, there's this unrelenting beam of fire and power that comes out, and that's why he wears the goggles to keep this under control. Yeah, Stryker's got him in the cage, and you're kind of wondering, well, he's got him in the cage and he's wearing his goggles. How is he keeping him in this steel cage? Why didn't he just like take his goggles off and cut his way out? And he had other characters, other mutants in these cages that when you looked at it and you thought about it for more than 20 seconds, it didn't make any logical sense. It was just like somebody that didn't know anything about X-Men characters just thought it would be cool to have them all locked up in a little menagerie, and they didn't put any thought into, well, would cages really hold them? Well, of course not, right? It's just stuff like that that just really ruins the movie if you put any kind of logical thought into it. 1.5 star. Awful special effects, messy timeline, mediocre plot, and boring characters. This movie was a mess. And worst of all, was that what they did to Wade Wilson, aka Deadpool. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds played Wade Wilson, and he was like a master of swords, of using Japanese katana swords, and he could twirl them around and actually shield himself from multiple people firing machine guns at him by flailing these swords around super fast. That wasn't that bad. And he did have like a smart aleck mouth to him, so this was clearly meant to be Deadpool. But then at the end, they gave him like laser Superman vision and the ability to teleport, and they sewed his mouth shut, and he looked like a bald character, and it wasn't Ryan Reynolds anymore. It was played by a totally different actor that was in this bald outfit, and it was completely bizarre. I mean, he was teleporting around, fighting Wolverine on the top of a steam tower. Like a steam tower you would see at a nuclear reactor plant. And they fought on the edge of this steam tower, and he teleported back and forth in front of and behind of Wolverine and tried to blast him with his laser eyes. But for some reason, he only aimed his laser beam eyes at Wolverine's claws at all times. When in the, with some small with some small flick of his eyes, he could have just cut Wolverine in half without any effort. But for some reason, he only chose to aim at Wolverine's claws for the sake of continuing the battle. It was completely stupid. Let's move on. 5 stars. I really liked this movie. It always gets a bad rap, but man, I've always really loved it. Well, that's nice, and you see those people out there, they just love this thing, and they're willing to argue it with people that there's nothing wrong with this movie. 2.5 stars, bad script, cliche story, and horrible VFX. Origins Wolverine is a low point for the franchise. Yeah, it was a low point, but I still say X-Men The Last Stand was less satisfying, more boring to me, more predictable and non-original. At least this had strange original stuff in it. It was a little different. X-Men The Last Stand was just like completely boring. I don't even think I sat through it the first time. I saw it on home video release, and I think I had to watch it 2 or 3 times to finish it because it was just boring to me. So I don't think this is the low point. I think X-Men The Last Stand is still the low point. 2.5 stars. Bad script, cliche story, and horrible VFX. Okay, I read that. I don't know why I'm repeating myself so much. Maybe this movie's just doing something to me. 4 stars. Hugh Jackman is awesome and a total badass. There's action that will keep you entertained the whole movie. It's a hell of a ride with Logan. Yeah, it's not really a hell of a ride. There's a scene in which he's riding a motorcycle and he uses his claw to turn himself around. Instead of just using the brakes like anybody else could do, he had to, for some reason, use his claw and put his claw into the ground to turn the bike around. No, it wasn't required. You could have done this with just riding a motorcycle normally, the way it's meant to be ridden, but it's just to look good in the movie and stuff like that. You're thinking, yeah, they're trying too hard. And then he rides this motorcycle up into the air and slices the blades of a helicopter and lands on a helicopter, and it's just so contrived. And when he walks away from the crashed helicopter, he does almost like a it's almost a buddy cop action comedy scene from the 90s or a Schwarzenegger movie where he walks away, strolls away so casually from, this crashed helicopter, and it explodes in a big fiery scene behind him as he doesn't flinch, and he just walks away slowly and, in a cool cat strut from the helicopter. And it's just kind of really stupid and over the top. So there's that. 4 stars. Great movie that kept me entertained the whole time while watching. Okay. 1 star. You took the Merc with the mouth, aka Wade Wilson, and sealed his mouth shut. Why? Yes, it was to just send a weird statement or a middle finger to comic book fans by the director, I guess. I don't know why. I mean, I wasn't a comic book fan, so to me, I didn't hear about this until other people told me about this online. To me, it was just kind of, maybe I thought his mouth was shut because they didn't want him to eat something, or, how would he eat? But anyway, yeah, it was just some kind of middle finger to comic book fans. I don't know what the story is there. 2.5 stars. With the less than stellar end to the original X-Men trilogy and a first film that hadn't aged well, X-Men Origins Wolverine had the chance to do something new while also maintaining the old, and what could go wrong? Hugh Jackman returned as Wolverine, Sabretooth was back, Deadpool and Gambit were getting their shot. Oh, how we were so innocent, with visual effects that are exceedingly laughable and cheap, especially compared to the originals, butchering classic characters. Yeah, I agree with all of that. That's why I say it's 2 stars. They're actually giving it 2.5 stars. I'm not sure why. They had some fun with it, I guess. 4 stars. A lot of people hate this movie. However, I do enjoy it, and I like it better than The Last Stand. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Like I said, The Last Stand is worse than this, less enjoyable. 2 stars. At least it's not a spin-off of a comic relief, but still falls flat. Yeah, it's not meant to be comic relief. It doesn't have self-parody. There's a very goofy scene in which Logan, for some reason, he has to fight the Blob in the ring. And it's got will.i.am from the Black Eyed Peas as a character, and I don't get what they were trying to do. It's goofy and it's not that funny, and it kind of interrupts the tone of the rest of the movie. And I don't know, it's like the movie's not funny, so it's not like quite a parody of itself. It's definitely not a drinking game movie where you can crack a beer and laugh about this, about how bad it is. No, it's not that. It just doesn't have enough of anything to be good for comedy or good for serious messaging. You can't really take it serious in any fashion. 1 star. This movie was predictable, awful, and for some reason which I am still struggling to understand, made the Merc with a Mouth Deadpool mute and have laser vision. What is this movie? I have come to expect much better from Marvel. Hugh Jackman is great as always, but he could only work with what he was given, and that was not anything good. The only interesting part of this movie is when Logan is a child, seeing him then. Yeah, it kind of it shows you him as a child and how he ran away from home. And originally he had bone claws, and then later, when Colonel Stryker and the government gets a hold of him, they replace his whole skeleton with adamantium, and then he has adamantium claws. And it's kind of not believable the way it's done. It's a little too perfect. It's a little too clean. And certainly, although in other X-Men movies, Logan says that it hurts every time he, extends his claws. It always hurts. But no, in this movie, he can do whatever he wants with them right from the start, and it doesn't seem to hurt him at all. He doesn't seem to mind taking them out in the bathroom just to play with them and mess up a sink. It's very strange. It's like incongruent with what we already knew from the other movies of Logan. 1/2 star. Turd of a film, hopeless plot, and awful effects. It will only appeal to teenage boys. Yeah, I agree. I think everybody that says they still enjoy it, they saw it as a teenager and they still are, in that frame of mind. 1/2 star, way worse than Dark Phoenix. I couldn't say Dark Phoenix. I don't count that with this franchise because that's like the new X-Men movies, and I have not seen Dark Phoenix. Although I've heard people tell me it is so incredibly bad, and they're arguing with each other whether, X-Men Apocalypse or X-Men Dark Phoenix is worse. I don't know because I haven't seen Dark Phoenix. 1/2 star, well, this was a mess. Yeah. 5 stars, I enjoyed it, can watch it over and over. Wow, okay. That could be a kid. 3 stars, I find Origins to be a better film than Logan. There's a lot to balk at, sure, particularly towards the sloppy third act, but the film's unfaithful treatment of Deadpool, probably the biggest source of outcry against it, isn't honestly the deal-breaker fans make it out to be. Jackman is given a meteor role this go-around, which, while unsubtle, probably does the best job of any X-Men film at informing Wolverine, Logan, as a character. His conflicted past with his half-brother. Okay, they're just going on a long, they're saying it's basically 3 stars and it worked for them, and that the Deadpool having his mouth sewn shut and having laser eyes isn't a deal breaker for them. But again, they're probably not a fan of the comic series because I've never heard a fan of the comics say any of this stuff. 2 stars, Origins isn't the worst movie I've ever seen, but there's no denying that pretty much everything in it, story, dialogue, visual effects, is lacking in polish compared to what came before. If my memory serves me right, this is also where continuity headaches first started to set in. Yeah, it does have some questions. Like the first time I saw it, I was kind of struggling to figure out where this fit in with the other X-Men movies before it. For example, when the first X-Men movie came out, we saw Logan driving a truck. We saw him with adamantium claws, etc. And he had not yet met Javier, Charles Javier, whatever his character's name is. We had not met him yet, or Logan hadn't met him yet. But then in this movie, it shows him meeting Patrick Stewart's Charles Javier, or Charles Xavier, at the end. In the very final scene of the movie, he meets him, or actually the other mutants that Wolverine released from their cages meet Charles Xavier, and it's a CGI version of Patrick Stewart that looks very unreal, and it certainly looks like a younger Patrick Stewart than what we even saw in the first um, the first X-Men movie, which would on its surface make sense, but then you look at some of the other stuff, like how he gets the name Wolverine, it doesn't quite match up with what we know from the other movies. It's hard to put all of this in there and then somehow make it work with the other film. It shows Wolverine meeting these other mutants and certainly fighting against Deadpool. And then, he meets Colonel Stryker and has a battle with him, and then gets amnesia when Colonel Stryker shoots him in the head. But again, all of this stuff is like treated as very new in the first X-Men movie, not just the amnesia being the excuse, but even the audience is kind of told all this stuff didn't come together till later. But yeah, it just makes you as an audience member struggle to kind of fit this in. I mean, it doesn't all quite fit. Some of it does, but some of it doesn't. Um, 4.5 stars. This movie, critically speaking, it may be very bad, but it's heck of an entertaining and epic. I disagree. There's nothing epic here. 2 stars. This movie has a much more festive, exaggerated tone, bordering on the ridiculous, typical of a video game or what it is, a film relegated to the B series. I expected more, much more from the origins of the charismatic and dark Wolverine. Yeah, it's very much like a video game movie. It's got video game logic. Even the very opening scene when this whole crew that Wolverine's a part of goes to Lagos, Nigeria. It's so cheap that they don't show you Lagos, Nigeria. They kind of have like a big map painting behind them, and they're just inside a warehouse, a studio, soundstage, and that's supposed to be Lagos, Nigeria, and it's very cheaply done, and it's off-putting right from the beginning. You can tell they don't have the budget to hardly go anywhere. 2 stars. An extremely lackluster X-Men film on many levels, including the mediocre acting and plotline. Action scenes were pretty good, but couldn't save this film from being a complete disappointment. Yeah, it's very cheaply done. Like I said, no budget to go to different locations. It was probably all filmed in Canada, most likely. 4 stars. I remember watching this movie when Ryan Reynolds was playing as Deadpool before he did the standalone movie. Also, I was very disappointing to this Deadpool version when he's in muted as Baraha from Mortal Kombat. Yeah, he does look like the character Baraka, I believe, from Mortal Kombat. That came across to me right away too. He's got swords like melded into his arms. Except for the laser vision, Baraka or Baracus didn't have laser vision. My favorite scene is where Wolverine fights with Bob in the boxing stage. It's not funny. I guess if it had been funny, if I had laughed, it would have been something. Otherwise, it just seemed like a time waster to me. 4 stars. Watched this as a kid and was hugely entertained. The generic plot doesn't take away from the great fight scenes. It's not only generic plot, but they're trying to cram too many different characters in here and explain them all at the same time, and it doesn't work. It's got too much stuff going on for how cheaply it's made. 0.5 star. If I could give it 0 stars, I would. 0.5 star. This is professionally made disaster, much like Wolverine in the bathroom sequence. Everything that this movie touches, it destroys. The X-Men continuity destroyed, Sabretooth destroyed, Wolverine's origin destroyed, the Merc with the Mouth Deadpool destroyed. And then, as this is a prequel, it has all the common prequel problems. You have them showing us characters before they're the heroes that we enjoy, so we're seeing them do things that we really don't want to see them do. Yeah, it doesn't fit. Like, there's an attempt to say that at the very last scene, Colonel Stryker shot Wolverine in the head with an adamantium bullet, and that's why he's got his amnesia and can't remember all of this when we see him again in the first Wolverine movie. But it doesn't explain a lot of the other stuff, like the Vietnam sequence. It doesn't explain that, how he's with Sabretooth there. It doesn't explain a whole bunch that, doesn't fit with the first 3 movies, X-Men, X-Men United, X-Men The Last Stand. That's a prequel problem. That's the problem. Prequels, you don't know what it is down the road that you're going to have to kind of retcon. But they didn't care. They just figured, 13-year-olds were going to see this movie, and they could just buy their ticket one time before they realized that a lot of it doesn't add up. 2 stars. There are a few elements that actually work in this prequel, but none of them are enough to compensate for the lack of creativity, poor execution, Terrible writing and awful looking special effects, ruining what it could have been a potentially promising spin off from a great character. I'll largely agree with that. 2.5 stars, all over the place with bad performance and visuals. 1 star, this is the worst comic book movie I have ever seen. The pacing is terrible, the characters are unlikable, the storytelling and story are bad. I don't think Hugh Jackman was even trying, and the CGI was awful as well. I'll largely agree, but don't say it's the worst comic book movie you've seen unless you actually have not seen Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Get back to me and then tell me that this is the worst one. I disagree. 3.5 stars. This movie gets too much hate. It's very entertaining and watchable, rewatchable. My biggest problem is the plot twist about his girlfriend. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense and it's unnecessary. Um, he's in love with this woman. They live in the wilderness of Canada, and they're shown as either married or living as a married couple. And she gets killed by one of the bad guys at the beginning of the film, and that gives him this quest for vengeance against Colonel Stryker and etc. and Sabretooth, because Sabretooth is the one that actually killed her. Now the problem is later on when it doesn't need to be done, they bring her back and reveal to Wolverine that she's actually still alive. She's been working with Colonel Stryker the whole time, and now she's against him too. It makes no sense because it's not necessary to the plot. It just further complicates things. It doesn't. It's not a twist that does anything. It has no effect on anything. It's not necessary. It actually takes away a lot of his previous rage and motivation for no purpose and makes it more meaningless. It's a complete mistake, and I don't know why they did that. It's again them just trying to cram more things into this to make up for how cheap the CGI was. That's the way it feels like to me. 3.5 stars. This movie gets too much hate. It's very entertaining and rewatchable. My biggest problem is the plot. Okay, I read that again, but it's worth saying again. Why did they bring his girlfriend back just to say she was working with Stryker the whole time? And why did they kill her off? I mean, pick one of the two, but doing both is just dumb and it just overcomplicates the plot and takes the meaning out of Wolverine's motivation to begin with. So you're just left going, what? You know? 3 stars, not English. 4 stars. I can see why many people hated this, but it's for the wrong reason, especially the design of Deadpool. But don't forget the excessive performance of Jackman and how it sticks to being an origin story film on a different setup. I don't know. This is an attempt to excuse the movie. Nothing here excuses any of it. They're just trying to say that everybody hates it because they don't like what they did with Deadpool. I disagree. A lot of people that didn't even know that was supposed to be Deadpool, that aren't comic book fans, that didn't have that reference, they found this movie to be crap too. So it's completely irrelevant. That's not an excuse. 1 star, May of 2019. One of the only things X-Men Origins has going for it is Hugh Jackman. He's still amazing as Wolverine, but with horrible CGI, a confusing plot, and of course, the dreaded treatment of Deadpool, this film just sucks. Yeah, I'll largely agree. 3 stars, I always forget Wolverine has a brother. Yeah, that's because in the first, one, two, three movies, yeah, we have Sabretooth, a completely different Sabretooth played by a different actor. He looks totally different, and there's nothing hinting that he's the brother of Wolverine. In fact, he fights with Sabretooth, if not directly, but indirectly in a group battle in the first 1 and 2 X-Men movies. Again, it's like they don't recognize each other or think that they're brothers. There's no conversation between them. It doesn't make sense with what they're showing us in this movie. It's like retconning it. Well, I don't know which one's accurate to the comics at all. I just don't know. But I know that this movie is flat out retconning the first 2 X-Men movies for sure. 3 stars. I always forget Wolverine has a brother. 3 stars. This movie is not so good. Yeah, then why are you giving it 3 stars? I don't know. 5 stars. Great movie. X-Men's Origin Wolverine 2009. I loved seeing this movie and worth going to a movie place to see this and paying dollars to see this in my opinion. All those capital letters and the exclamation point, this has to be parody. I'm going to take this as sarcasm. 1.5 stars. It starts off with a bang, only for it to completely fall flat right after. The actors do try with the story and script, but they alone cannot save this superhero mess. The plot is unbalanced and inconsistent. There's a severe lack of cool action, setting on more cheesy effects instead. There is also no heart, message, or substance to back up the overacting and abysmal CGI. If you love the character of Wolverine, run. Yeah, I largely agree with all that. You could just skip this one and just go with the Wolverine. Now, I'm warning anybody that the Wolverine is not that much better. It's not going to be a blockbuster to blow you away, but it's less offensive to X-Men comic fans than this movie is. 2.5 stars. X-Men Origins Wolverine, 5 out of 10. Wolverine is one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Pantheon. He is also one of the worst. He has the same problem as Superman, invulnerability. Since no one can kill him, it is somewhat difficult to create any real tension in the action scenes. Origins don't even try. Wolverine befriends someone kind and innocent with eyes like a baby fawn. The baby fawn is then brutally murdered. Wolverine goes nuts and destroys a bunch of stuff. Yeah, actually, I don't think that part of the story is the flaw. It's just everything else. He's not like Superman. Obviously, you can come up with ways that he can be defeated. For example, they easily came up with the adamantium bullets that Colonel Stryker used. So, and saying he's Superman, no, I don't think so. I think if you blew him up into little bits, it'd be hard to imagine that he would somehow heal when all his bits are vaporized. So no, it's not quite like Superman. It's not that bad, but it is tough to make it tension filled. 3 stars. I think it's just mediocre movie. I enjoyed some parts, but overall, meh movie. Yeah, that's the bulk of people, I think. 5 stars. This film is amazing. Don't care if people dislike it. Yeah, a lot of people, like I said, they just stick by this thing. 2 stars. Overacted. It breaks the canon. Poor special effects. A plot he doesn't know he wants to tell. 3.5 stars. Not great, but not bad either. Deadpool fans may be displeased at how he was portrayed. He has too much charisma and potential for his role in this film. Yeah, saying that Deadpool fans were disappointed is like a vast understatement. They were very angry. They're still angry even today. 1 star. Hey, it's Deadpool. Oh, you sewed his mouth shut. 3 stars. Half the movie is good, the other half isn't. 4 stars. Excellent until Ryan Reynolds Deadpool. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds Deadpool fixed that problem, I guess, but still people are angry over this one. You still see it referenced. 4 stars. I know this is a bad movie, but I absolutely love it. It's definitely one of my favorite X-Men films, and I've seen all of them. 1 star. Literally the worst X-Men movie of the entire Fox franchise. There's no heart, no meaningful message. It's just all mindless action with a half-baked plot. X-Men Origins Wolverine is that rare movie that you wished you forgot it existed. The only good example it offers is for filmmakers not to make the same mistakes that it did. Seriously, the transitions between scenes, the motives of each character, the PS2 effects, they're all just bad. Thankfully, without this film, yeah, I largely agree with that. Bad effects and transitions. I don't remember the transitions being really bad. I remember them being very fast, like very fast transitions between distant points in time. 2.5 stars. Prequel reveals that Tim Rothman was plotting against the franchise since before the first movie. 0.5 star. A 6-year-old has better effects and story in a movie he made by himself about a dinosaur and a stick. 3.5 stars. Contrary to others, I feel this movie really has entertainment value in the X-Men franchise and gives some insight on Wolverine's story. Well, yeah, it does give you the story of him and his brother. I don't know if that's true to the comics or not, but yeah, it completely retcons Wolverine and Sabretooth as seen in the first 3 movies, though. 0.5 star. No. 5 stars. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine is one of a kind, and this movie specifically brings out the best backstory and action to the character. No. I'm not sure if they actually watched it or not on that one. On that particular review, it doesn't strike me as being genuine. 0.5 star. This movie is what corporate scumbags scrape off the bottom of their shoe. The only reason why it gets even a 0.5 star is for Hugh Jackman's performance as Wolverine, but if you only came for that, then just go watch any other X-Men movie. 4 stars. I can't rate X-Men bad. I love seeing them acting on screen. 3 stars. It's got good action, but it's still just okay. There are better X-Men films than this, of course. X-Men, X-Men Days of Future Past, and the greatest X-Men film that is better than the Wolverine and Origins combined. In fact, the best Logan film and the best X-Men film, Logan. That's a lot of words just to say Logan. Why couldn't you have just said the best Wolverine movie is Logan, and just leave it at that. Why get so wordy, really? Continuing, that one is extraordinary. The Wolverine might be a 3.5 for me, maybe 4 stars. I haven't seen it in some years now. Don't let this nostalgia creep up on you. It's just 2 stars, no higher than 2 stars. 1 star, 15% rotten good, but story is shit. 5 stars, tremendous high fantasy and action film. Everything, story, cast, VFX, etc. are tremendous. One of my favorite movies. Regards. Yeah, I don't believe you. It sounds like you copy and pasted that across a whole swath of movies out there. Half a star. The only thing X-Men Origins has going for it is Hugh Jackman. He's still amazing as Wolverine, but with horrible CGI, a confusing plot, and of course the dreaded treatment of Deadpool, this film just sucks. 1 out of 10. 1.5 stars, very bland story. They also waste Gambit and several other characters, and I do even need to mention Deadpool in this movie. Yeah, they had Gambit. He was he was played by an actor that wasn't real popular at the time. The same actor that was the main actor in Battleship and in John Carter on Mars. I guess his name is Taylor Lautner or something to that effect. In any case, he was totally unknown in this movie at the time, and he played Gambit as just like a card shark that threw cards at you really fast, that could kill you with a deck of cards, and he had magic that involved, a deck of cards used as weapons. I don't know what that's like compared to the Gambit in the X-Men comic books, but I don't think it is very accurate because I've heard that really ragged on a lot online, so I'll leave that there. 1.5 stars, very bland story. They also waste Gambit. Okay. 2.5 stars, an extremely poor start to an otherwise perfect trilogy. So they're thinking that this went on to become a trilogy. I don't know if that's sarcasm or not, because this killed that any hope of another X-Men Origins movie. So there was no trilogy. Half a star. This movie is a mess. Besides Hugh Jackman, the acting was garbage. It's a cheap movie that not only is a bad comic book movie, it's just a bad movie. Also, I can't get over the fact that Deadpool couldn't talk. Yeah, there's a lot of that. That's the number one thing you find online, that they sewed Deadpool's mouth shut. Number one complaint. This was a 2009 movie. They didn't attempt to use de-aging software. They just flat out put a CGI version of Patrick Stewart in as a younger Charles Xavier. And, I believe it wasn't Charles Xavier that actually could walk. Isn't that a problem? Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier walking around, not in a wheelchair. That not only conflicts with the first 3 X-Men movies, but it conflicts with the later X-Men movies, the Days of Future Past, etc. So it completely doesn't belong in either one of these X-Men versions or alternate movie universes. That's another complaint. 2 stars. This movie was awful. I really hate this movie. This movie should have at least a 35% RT audience score. The movie's plot is lacking. They fucked up Wolverine's origin story. How could the writer screw up Wolverine's backstory? Wolverine and Sabretooth are brothers in this film. They're not supposed to be brothers. They were never brothers in the comics. They were never related to each other in the comics. The first scene where James and Victor are kids, they never got to explain who and why. Okay, so there's my answer. This is actually the incorrect version of them being brothers. So the first 3 X-Men movies had it right. They don't know each other. They're not brothers. So yeah, there you get a good idea of why, another reason why people really hate this film, retconning and retconning. There you go, though. You have an audience score of 58%. So does it deserve to be lower? Many people would argue yes, that this is almost not rotten, believe it or not, and so maybe it does deserve to be more like a 25% on the audience score, but enough people like it. This is very divisive. There's enough people that just still enjoy this thing. They don't care about the retcons. They don't care about Deadpool's mouth being sewn shut. They just find this is a great time. Bad CGI and all. So I guess there you have it, and I will see you all again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.